Hello, Frank.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm fine. I just came from an interesting. Um, there's
Well,
this woman who's a friend of.
hold on one moment. Johnny Bremer is. I'll
Okay.
admit anybody while we're talking. I'll admit anybody who comes
Yeah,
up.
yeah, yeah.
Here's Johnny. Eventually, here's Johnny.
He's muted yet at this point.
And here is George Farrick.
Ah, George is joining us.
George is joining us. And I guess Tim can't make it.
Hi,
Hi,
George.
George.
We haven't seen your face for so long.
Yes,
Hello,
I
George.
thought I thought I'd show it to you. I've been seeing your faces.
Yeah, and you're just out of this world.
Yeah, while I'm following up on John Grimmer's sending those photos of outer
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
I've been
really.
involved in a project called the acronym is GLIO, GLIO, means getting my life in order.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah,
And
and
it's not a short-term project either.
it isn't. It isn't. I guess there are some urgent items. You know, in business, you may have come across this quadrant. I forget what it was called. It was you draw a piece of paper into four quadrants. One is, to help you prioritize what you should be doing.
The important and urgent one.
Urgent and not necessary, necessary, not urgent, et cetera,
Yeah.
et cetera.
Mhm.
So I've got some urgent getting life in order to do, and then some long-term continuing in that project.
Johnny,
John.
hello. Norm, hello.
Hello, happy
Hello.
Friday. Welcome back, Norman.
Hello, and I'm glad to be back.
Good.
Hi, Norm.
We're
And
glad
Good
to
to see you,
have
George.
Good to see you, Norm.
Good to see you, Bob. I can't see you though.
You can't
Bob.
see me. What happened to my image here? Oh, here.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Now you
There
can
you
see
are.
me.
There you
Hi,
are.
Bob.
Hello, Bob. You have a
Hello,
fancy
hello.
background too.
We missed the palm trees.
Yeah, I don't know what happened here.
Yeah.
I'm on the wrong list of my filters. So anyway,
Yeah, you've
enjoy
gone
it.
down to the wine cellar.
Or stained glass windows or museum or church or something.
Yeah.
It's a German church. I forget which one it is, and it's an image of the Trinity.
Ah,
Yeah, I can tell by the dove.
It's
okay.
three rabbits chasing one another.
Really? Ah, that's
Well,
cool.
Probably as good as any.
Let me see if
Yeah.
I can-
Which,
It's a dynamic instead of a still, that's for sure.
yeah, three rabbits chasing each other. That's
Yeah. Yeah, that's better than
like a dog.
that's much better than a dog or a cat chasing a rabbit.
It's the
All three are,
dynamism of the
all three are of the
Trinity.
same nature.
yeah. So Frank
Well, it might.
we were interrupted by everybody coming online. So go for it.
What's
No,
that?
I was just going to tell you that just came back from an interesting anointing, because the person to be anointed belongs to a book club, which is a group of women who've been meeting for years socially, but haven't read a book for 15 of those 20 years or so. So,
Well, I hope you heard her
so
confession too.
but it was very nice because they were all there and they kind of embraced her, and they all participated in the
Wow.
laying on of hands, so to speak, and the calling of the spirit, etc. So
How nice.
it was a nice thing,
Yeah.
and a more effective way, I think, to celebrate the sacrament than waiting until the last breath.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what it's supposed to be.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
but you still can't shake last rites. After 50 years, you can't shake it with some people.
Well, and the thing is, the younger ones are coming up with the old shaken one.
Yeah.
So,
So
well,
I can be here for about a half an hour, then I have to take off.
look like you've already taken off from your background.
Yeah, really. Yeah, I just landed for half.
Blast-
Oh,
It'll
okay.
be
To
a
get back in
blast
my
off.
spaceship.
Yeah, I have to leave about 2:20 my time.
Well, since I'm on vacation, I don't mind finishing up a bit early anyway, because there's still some scarecrows to see and some shopping to do.
Great. You're in that
You
beautiful
really get
spot.
into Halloween, huh?
Well, every year in October, Cambria has the Scarecrow Festival. And of course, it gets more elaborate every year. And one of them that I got a picture of this year they tend to be a little bit more in groups, although most of the stores have their own, but there's also some organizations that put them in groups in various places. And there's one that is art-centered. These painted paper mache and makeshift statues, sort of like scarecrows and whatnot, depicting different styles in art.
Mm.
They even they have one of the Mona Lisa with a kind of a mannequin made up to be Mona Lisa and a gold picture frame.
Hmm.
We have a very nice one, which is a painted painted goodie of the Theotokos, the
Oh.
icon.
Hmm.
But
Do they have any that dress like Tom Welbers?
no, Welbers is
Not
unique.
yet, not yet. Give him time.
Not yet. But when we get back, I'll put some of these up online and send you the link to them. It's a delightful time of year to be here. The only thing is the hills aren't green.
Hmm. Yeah.
And this is the bed and breakfast where we are, looking out into the parking lot. It's actually kind of a dull gray day. If it were sunny, this would be too bright and you couldn't see me, which might be okay. But let me show you what it looks like now.
Yeah, there's a lot of green trees out there.
Few green trees and
Yeah.
that's a parking area, yeah. So anyway, it's been a pleasant week.
Very good.
So what's new?
I just finished a retreat, actually, in this Boston College owns the building, but it's an old mansion sitting on an inlet of what's called Cohasset Harbor, which is a beautiful spot here south of Boston.
Was it a silent retreat or somebody giving talks?
Someone giving talks, and we could talk to each other, but you have enormous amount of time to be silent and a beautiful place to do it, because fortunately the weather really turned nice on Tuesday afternoon, and you're sitting on this absolutely gorgeous harbor, looking at the few lobster boats that come in and out this time of year, and just the ocean was not angry.
Well, the ocean here certainly isn't angry. We had a dinner last night at the Moonstone Bar and Grill on the Moonstone Beach, and that was lovely sunset.
Is that north of Cambria, Tom? Is Moonstone Beach north of the downtown?
Yeah, it's kind of north of the downtown.
Yeah, I remember I've been there. It's really spectacular, actually. Yeah.
There's actually two downtowns. The older one is the East Village, which is where we are, and then the Catholic Church separates the East Village from the West Village. The West Village is a little more touristy, and not quite so quaint.
Well, also, I could ask for prayers for two classmates of George and Bob and I who died a week ago Saturday. Jim Bretta, who was my companion, the other one who went to Rome with me. I preached at his funeral mass. And then tomorrow is John Paul Meyer, who was the scripture scholar who wrote that, monumental tome on Jesus, a Marginal Jew, and was professor of scripture at Notre Dame. John died on the 18th, and his funeral is at the New York Seminary tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. So he was a great man, made great contributions to the study of scripture.
He did. Well, it wasn't one of his first books in conjunction with Raymond Brown.
More than likely, because
Yes.
he was very much a disciple of Raymond Brown's.
Oh. There's one thing, I had the books and I skimmed through them for, gleaning insights and data and that kind of stuff. But one of the things I was very disappointed in, he gave very, very little. I mean, in 7 volumes, he just barely mentioned the Essenes.
Okay.
Oh,
And I'm very much following the line of some scripture scholars who feel that the Essenes had a big influence, not just in John the Baptist, but in particular in Jesus. And that Nazareth has all the earmarks of having been an Essene village. Not a monastic village, obviously, but and once you make that connection and realize that, the Essenes were not just what their writings were, or the stuff that was, found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but that they had a rich and varied sort of life. A lot of the stuff that Jesus emphasizes were part of the, part of the Essene way of life.
So
And then-
Tom, were the Essenes Jewish, but a certain type of practice, or were they different?
They were very definitely Jewish. They
Yeah.
were,
Okay.
and Josephus talks a lot about them. They were one of the 4 sects that Josephus mentions,
Okay.
and a couple of things characterized them. They considered themselves to be authentically, probably the only real authentic identifiable line of David. And for that reason, they really did feel that the Messiah was going to come from them, and that but the Hasmoneans, of which Herod, I believe, was, part, they were kind of interlopers. They were half not Jewish, and they felt that the priesthood, the Levitical priesthood, was corrupt, which of course it was at that time. And they had a high regard for the temple and absolutely zero regard for the and opposition to the Sadducees who were running the temple, which of course corresponds to Jesus very much.
I'm looking at the index of his first volume, Tom. It does have a number of citations of the Essenes, but they're like one or 2 pages. And he refers you to Qumran, where he has also a number of additional citations. So I don't know, but it doesn't appear that, at least in the first volume, there's any extended treatment of either the Essenes or Qumran.
Right. And I looked through the others and didn't find much more.
Well, maybe in 6. He was working in volume 6 when he died, because I talked to him about 2 or 3 months ago, and I said, John, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm working on Collins, who's the scripture scholar at Yale, is always hounding him about doing another volume. And that, in hindsight, it's interesting, because he didn't say anything about any health problems or anything, but he said, I'm working on volume 6, but probably someone else is going to have to finish it.
Hmm.
Who are you talking about, Frank?
John Meyer.
Oh, okay, yeah.
John died on Tuesday, I think.
Oh, yeah, I've got his book, The Historical Jew.
Jesus, right. The Marginal Jew.
Marginal Jew, yeah.
Yeah, and I do too. Or I did have it until I downsized, and I forget who I gave it to.
Well, I have it, but I've never read it, but at least I have it. It'll be part of my legacy for any of my siblings who would like to read it.
Probably won't.
How old was John Meyer?
80 and
R.A.
he's on, he was a classmate of George and Bob's and mine.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, wow, yeah. Well, he's a very highly respected
yeah, he is. John
scripture scholar.
Yeah.
Is he a Jesuit?
No, he's a priest of the Archdiocese of New York.
Ah,
Well, you know what Cardinal Wright said when someone asked him, a diocesan priest, if he was a Jesuit. He said, no, but I'm literate.
I used to always think the phrase I always heard is lost as a Jesuit in Holy Week. Very bright, not too. Although I admire them, I admire their spirituality, of Ignatius.
I'm going through some of my books and I'm going to distribute them. I may send a memo out to you in case anybody's interested. I have some Lonergan books that I'm going to move on. And there's a book by David Tracy. So Frank, when you mentioned John Meyer, having this last book, David Tracy, I think, is about 83 or 82. I think he was 2 years ahead of.
I think he's close at 84 or 5, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And he's supposedly writing what they call the big book about God.
Yeah.
The big book about God. And just a couple of years ago, there were a couple volumes published with his essays called Fragments is one of them, and the other is called Filaments. And there's some very interesting articles. So I kind of followed a thread through the rabbit hole into, in the internet, and came up with different interesting articles about Dave Tracy and interviews, and very fascinating, his theology. And so I'm interested in following up on some of that. But
Speaking of rabbit holes, Gary, you weren't here when Bob Bono, who I guess is fixing himself a cup of coffee, described the window that forms his background. That's in a German church, he said, that is the image of the Trinity. And the image is 3 rabbits chasing one another.
Oh. And where is it?
Said somewhere in Germany. We'll have to ask him the exact place. I'd love to track that down. That's a very, very interesting concept of the Trinity.
yeah, maybe that was devised by Meister Eckhart when he was gardening.
Could be. Could be.
Maybe John Updike even was inspired by it.
That's right.
In contrast, when Bergoglio was in Germany, he more or less had been demoted among the Jesuits.
Yeah.
And he went off, but he came back not with this kind of icon, but with Mary, the undoer of knots.
Right.
And Norm, I just wonder if you contrast in your ministry that icon of the Trinity with Mary, undoer of knots, which is going to be effective in your ministry.
I never thought of putting the two together, though. That's interesting. I have a picture of Mary Untier of Knots. I have seen the picture of the other at the Priest's House of Prayer, but I don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
I just have a sense. I haven't worked in adult faith formation for 6 years now, but that's much more effective, I think, in our current ministry.
I never, until you started talking about it, I never heard of Mary the Undoer of Knots. Where does that come from?
Ireland.
Ireland?
No,
No?
Germany.
Was
That
it Germany? Oh, okay.
Bergoglio got it in Germany. I'm not sure
In
if
a
that's,
small town, small parish, I don't remember the details of the story, but it was, I don't know, somewhere 100, 200 years ago, something like that, where this nobleman and his wife were having serious marital problems. And I think he had a dream, that they had a marriage band that part of the ritual tied them together. And he had a dream that they had tied all these knots in this marriage band.
Oh,
And that Mary was seeking devotion to her and was shown, I think, in the dream, untying those knots. And so the image that they had painted, was, showed the marriage band with all these knots in it coming up. She's holding it in the middle, and on the other side, it's just free flowing loose, and she's in the process of untying the knots for them. And
thank you, Tom.
worked.
That's really great insight. That's usable stuff, I think.
Well, look it up online to be sure that I got the before you use it in your next homily or whatever. Look it up and be sure to get the story right. I think I got something of the gist of the story, but
yeah, for some reason, Joan of Arc comes to mind, that she may have been praying to Mary Undoer of Knots as they were about to set fire to her, tied to the stake.
she may have been.
Yeah.
So that image comes from as early as Joan of Arc or before that?
No, I think it's in the 1800s. I'm kind of surprised, Gary, because it was very, very popular in the first year of Francis's papacy.
It was.
It hasn't.
Yeah, I never, but I don't read a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm not on the internet a lot, or I don't. I read his Evangelii Gaudium, and in fact, I did a study of that with a group, and also the Laudato Si, is it Laudato Si on
The environment.
Yeah.
But do a search for it. Mary the Undoer of Knots,
Yeah, well.
Mary the Untier of Knots.
Yeah, there's a little bookstore or gift store nearby that I purchased some little wooden images, which I'll mail to each of you. A little thing of Mary Undoer of Knots.
Oh,
Really?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
well, it's a helpful image.
It is.
Yes.
I see, George, you got your copy already, but it's taking Bob a long time.
Maybe he's, yeah,
I'm here.
There he is.
there he is.
I've been listening to the whole thing and working on putting together a piece of furniture that broke.
Oh,
Hopefully not your
You know,
chair.
here's my screwdriver.
There you go.
Mary Undoer of Knots, Bob,
There you
picture
go,
of
yeah.
furniture.
Tom, what's happened to George Crook? I haven't seen him. He's not been on.
I'm concerned. His
Yeah, I haven't.
his mailbox is full.
wow.
I've tried to call him several times.
I heard that he was ill, but I don't know how ill.
And I think Ned, with whom he's in touch with, Ned had his surgery, right? Not
Yeah.
just a few days ago. And
And I've left messages for him as well.
yeah,
Excuse me. So I've tried in the last couple days, unsuccessful with both George and Ned.
But has Ned had hip surgery, or what did he have? Knee surgery?
Knee replacement.
Knee replacement.
Yeah. I got an interesting insight from a friend of mine. It was Yvonne Vick, who had hip replacement, and she explained how much easier hip replacement is than knee replacement because you've got a big anchor point with that hip bone, and you don't have that with the knee. So
Right.
it's a real delicate one that Ned has to go through. Those of you who don't know Shavira, in the seminary, he was the great running back. He could dodge around everybody. And I told him when I found out about the knee replacement, this is payback from all those times he made us flop trying to catch him.
But he's also a quarterback too. He loved to throw the ball too.
He did. He had a very strong arm, but he wasn't as accurate as Sokol and Dobbins and Shelburne. Those three guys ahead of
You're
us.
accurate, yeah.
Yeah. Those are the long ago days, though.
For Donald Montrose, way back. Great
Frank,
quarterback.
you know, speaking of Shelburne, he was the quarterback in Rome.
Was
for
he?
Yeah, do you remember that, Frank and Bob? I think there was a game where the freshmen played upper class, and anyway,
new-
Shelburne was a winning quarterback there.
The new men, as they call them.
Yes.
They call them the new men. I'm going there Saturday night. I'm
You're going to NAC?
going to the NAC. I'm arriving
Wow.
Sunday night. Yeah, I told the guys last week, there's a month-long program.
Yeah,
They do these 3 one-month modules there now. And the first two, what is called the theology of the passion, and the second one is called the preaching the passion, and the third one is the passion in Renaissance art in Rome and in Venice. And I was talking to the head of the institute. He said, we've had a tremendous response to this module. I said to myself, no wonder. It's not going to be deep, heavy. It'll be interesting
yeah,
to figure, to see how great artists, what they saw, I think it'll be interesting. But of course, the most important thing is, as my friend Ned Ryan said the other day, he says, we're there to have fun. And Frank, George Morin is going there. This is a guy who was on it and is bringing a first wave of Negronis with him when he gets there. So I'll be getting there late that night, so they'll have a drink for me. But it'd be interesting to go back to the NAC after it's been about 20 years for me.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was there for 2.5 months, and
I reached out to Mike Malloy, who is in Hawaii, to see if he might want to send something or join us at some point. But I think you classmates might remember that Mike Malloy was devastated that they did not send him to Rome, and
Yes.
couldn't
Oh, yeah.
believe they sent. That was Frank Lyons.
Frank Lyons and George Farrick.
Yeah.
That was a double mistake. You should have sent Tom Welbers and Mike Malloy. Yeah,
Quite frankly, I really wanted to be sent to Rome too. I knew that I wouldn't be because they never chose me to take Hebrew.
ah,
because I was in that group, I took Hebrew. I remember
yeah.
You
So
were.
did they
They had their eye on you, Gary.
they
so did
did.
they
Yeah,
choose
no.
people to take Hebrew? I don't remember that.
They did,
We had to
yes.
take-
And I wanted to be chosen too, because I'm good at languages, but
Ah.
they didn't choose me.
Well, I'm glad it would have been exciting to be there, but I was happy to
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, I have no idea why I was selected.
Yeah.
Well, as I say, Roma veduta, fede perduta.
What is it?
Roma veduta, pardon me, Roma veduta, fede perduta.
So, Gary,
be
other
careful,
than-
Gary.
Short of the resurrection, I can't think of better relief from the passion than a Negroni.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm all, today is packing day. I've done all the picking. Now I just got to, the picking is what takes the time. The packing is easy. So
Oh, Gary, that could be a New York Times travel article if you write this up.
what's that?
Your trip and the theme and the Negronis and all that and the conversations you have and
And picking and
reflections.
packing.
Yeah.
Pick-
the less-
Picking and packing has important steps.
Yeah, yes, yeah. And you know, it's interesting, I want to take a 3-day, and next Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, they have nothing on the schedule that I could see, and I need to go up to a town called Viareggio. Well, we talked about that last week.
Yeah, I listened to that. Yeah.
The thing is, you know, it's been so long, it's been about at least 3 years since I've been in Italy, and you just realize, you know, you just have to adapt, because I need to rent a car when I get there on Saturday, but the car agency is only open till 12:30. I mean, Saturday. So, you know, otherwise I was thinking that I could leisurely get up and go to the train station and get a train and then pick up a car. But no, you've got to get.
Yeah, the siesta time.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
it's siesta, but it closes. It doesn't open up again until Monday morning.
really,
It's just how Italy, you know, it's just different.
Mhm.
It's
It
a
is.
small thing. It's a small thing. So, but it'll be good to be there, because Rome is I think it's one of the great cities of the world. It's wonderful.
it is.
It is.
Yeah. And,
I saw some pundit or commentator or somebody referring to all of the stuff that England is going through.
yes.
Wow.
England is becoming Brittany.
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 Well, look at what it is. She lasted 6 weeks.
Unstable government, financial problems, et cetera, et cetera.
Well,
Yeah.
did this woman undo the whole financial system? I mean, almost on a whim. Not
Yeah.
on a whim, really. But I
Well,
mean,
she's an ideologue,
is that what
and
she
the conditions on the ground aren't going to deter her from, you know, her hard-nosed economic and political direction.
I think she must have got her promptings from Trump.
Yeah, there you
You know,
go.
give big tax breaks to the rich. Yeah,
Yeah,
it'll
well,
trickle down.
the name may be the same origin, Truss and Trump.
There you go.
But then they've redone it. I mean, is it the Chancellor of the Exchequer? What do they call
Yep.
Jeremy Hunt? He just kind of reversed everything, didn't he?
Yeah,
He wants to be prime minister, and he may very well navigate that, because he was eliminated in the early stages when it came down to her. But the other one is Rishi Sunak, who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer with Boris Johnson.
Ah,
But he fell out of favor because his resignation is what brought Johnson down. So the Johnson allies in the Conservative Party didn't vote for him. They voted for, plus to the fact he's got a little too much color in his face.
ah,
Yeah.
well, you know what I'll be interested in seeing is if I remember when I was in at this sabbatical in 2002. The Kevin McCoy was the priest who was the rector of the seminary, and he gave us a talk, the opening orientation, and he said, you know, the seminarians and the priests work under two, how do you say it, false presuppositions or false assumptions. The priests think of seminarians as very rigid, you know, very conservative, the kind of priests that we talk about, you know, who want to undo the Second Vatican Council, and the seminarians think of priests as washed out 60s liberals, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Well,
we are.
Yeah, I know we are, and I did see that strain in the seminarians at the time. I mean, that much more, all the things that we've seen about young clergy, I saw that then. And I'm just wondering now that Francis has been around for a while, if the seminarians, if the tone of the seminary is going to be the same.
They don't accept him.
Changed.
They think he's really, so a lot of them even think he's illegitimate.
I'm sorry?
A lot of the seminarians think that Pope Francis is illegitimate. It's not really,
Yeah.
wasn't really validly elected Pope.
Oh,
True hardcore sede vacantists think
Yeah.
that Pius XII was the last legitimate pope.
There's been no legitimate pope since 1958.
Well,
well, Norma, the seminarians in Los Angeles, I mean, the newly ordained priests, are they all like that, or
They are, a lot of them are like, not all, a lot of them are like that.
I did a funeral of a cousin of mine down in Hacienda Heights with Tim Nichols,
Uh-huh.
and I met his associate. Seemed like a very solid guy, who during COVID kind of organized, at least, or they were in the parish, they just organized a phone committee and were calling all the people in their parish. But he seemed like a pretty, I mean, I said it was nice to meet a young priest who seemed to be, I don't know how,
Pastoral.
more pastoral. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there are some. There are some.
Yeah.
There's the others who like to parade around in their castles.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just talked to one of our bishops, and he told me that he sees a need to have younger priests and older priests talk to each other, but can't quite figure a way out to do it.
Negronis.
Well, I've had two dinners with these two young priests in our diocese. One who is in this here in the parish, and the other one loves to wear his cassock. In fact, I told my seminarian friend Chris, I said, Chris, tell John if he shows up in the cassock, I'm going to throw him out. I'm in with something other than I mean, and he was very good, very sharp, very bright. And, I don't think I don't know it's going to change much, but it was interesting talking to them. They have very good, I mean, they sort of know where they are, I guess. I mean,
We have one
they weren't
priest.
interested in talking to me much about what I thought, so.
We have one priest in our neighborhood who's put the altar against the wall and faces the wall for mass now.
Yeah, our bishop did that. He in the chancery office.
Oh my God.
He told Dan Welton is a close friend of mine, and he retired, and he was the vicar general. And at a certain point, a number of years ago, the bishop said, "Well, I'm going to move the altar," because they have mass in the chancery office, I guess, every day for the staff. And he said, "I'm going to offer turn the altar around and put it against the wall and say mass that way." And Dan said, "Then I will never say mass here again." And he
Wow.
never did.
I think you should send him a note saying, "You've got it ass backwards."
Thank you,
there
George.
is one thing. If you're celebrating the liturgy according to the revised rite, the only thing that is relevant there is the orientation of the Eucharistic prayer, because the revised rubrics, direct that the liturgy of the word not be at the altar, and the liturgy of the word, all the ministers of the word, including the presider, should be facing the people.
Right.
So it's only at the presentation of the gifts, you would place the gifts on the altar ad orientem, And then the Eucharistic prayer would be facing the same way as the rest of the people. But even there, you're directed to the elevation. The so-called elevation is not an elevation. It's you show the consecrated elements to the people, which, remember, John Paul II always turned around 360 degrees to show the consecrated host and chalice to the people.
Well, uh-huh.
With
The
that,
new
you're-
arch- the new Archbishop of Louisville, Kentucky, came up from down in Louisiana. He's an African American, and his predecessor, I think, was very conservative in letting that unfold. So early on, when he got into Louisville, he went to visit one of the parishes. I don't think it was a confirmation or anything, but he was just making his rounds. And it was a relatively young priest in a parish, and he had everything all set up for ad orientem. And the bishop said, "What's that all about?" And he said, "Well, I'm not saying mass that way. You set it up to face the people." So I think that there are bishops that are not putting up with that, but we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, a lot of work to do. Yes, I agree with that.
Well, you know, in the Archdiocese of Boston, on the letter that was sent out over Cardinal O'Malley's signature introducing the Eucharistic year, the image on the letter was a priest saying mass with his back to the people.
Wow.
Now,
Wow.
I don't think Sean chose that, but whoever put the letter together for him did.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so what we're dealing with is we really need to start asking questions about what kind of theology is being taught in the seminaries. And also, I think, is there common ground between people who are trained or educated? I don't trained, you do that for SEALs, who are educated like we were. And yeah, I think we got to find something like that. We just can't write these people off
Well,
or let them write us off.
one element of common ground is there are two good, I think, in some ways, proportionally valid reasons
Folks, I have
one
to take off.
or the other.
See you,
See you,
George.
George.
Hi, George.
Bye.
Good to see you, George.
Yes, Gary, have a good trip.
Thank you, George.
Good to see you, Norm.
Yes.
You know, there is something to be said, I think, for the image of leadership of the pilgrim people. That praying the Eucharistic prayer, and here's another thing. I just hate the expression. If it were up to me, I would banish it from our vocabulary to say mass.
Yes.
When you
Yes.
say mass, and we all do it reflexively. That's
I say celebrate.
yeah, I do too normally, but sometimes I'll forget.
I gotta say mass.
You know, to say mass, that immediately goes back to the pre-Vatican II mentality of the mass being a unified thing from start to finish. The priest goes to the altar, says mass, and then leaves the altar. Whereas Vatican II was, very, very clear of the two distinct parts of the Eucharistic celebration. In fact, they even refer to the patristic image of the table of the Word and the table of the Eucharist, that there are two tables that we are nourished from. A church in my ancestral hometown in Germany, Emmerich, Germany, built actually during the I think it was built during the 60s, early 60s. But it had two distinct altar-sized tables, one for the Word and one for the Eucharist. And they were similar but distinct. Now, if you begin to get that mentality, you could kind of say, well, the proclamation and unfolding of the Word is within the assembly. And then the presider, in fact, I personally think the presider's chair should be within the assembly rather than, you know, facing it,
Separate.
opposed to it. So then you have the presider leading the assembly to the altar. And there is something to be said for the presider going around the altar and facing the people and kind of embracing them with the Eucharist at the center. There is something to be said for the presider being the one who is at the forefront of the people facing the Eucharistic mystery. Both, I think, are valid theologies that are not necessarily, in some ways, you can't do one and the other at the same time, except for Church in the Round, which we tried for some time. But if we could accept, if each side could accept the validity of the other side and the logic of the other side, and not be rigidly opposed to each other, we might begin to have some common ground. But let's face it, the ultra-conservative seminarians and young priests find us as rigid in our mentality as we do them. And it's sort of like the political polarization. We are confrontative rather than trying to either side, trying to see the value of the other side.
But the thing is, it's interesting. As I said, I had dinner with these two priests and I asked them about their journey and that sort of thing. They never once asked me anything.
Wow.
About my priesthood, about my ministry, about my ecclesiology, literature, whatever. They never once asked me at all. And have never asked, I mean, this one priest has never taught, I mean, they don't ask me. I mean, I've been a priest for 50 years. You know?
Yeah.
I don't want to barge in on their lives, but it was interesting, and I enjoyed the conversation. But it was also interesting that they had no interest at all.
Yeah, and I don't know how to awaken that interest either. Possibly. By the way, Johnny, I've read about half of Continuo's, Paul Continuo's, what is it?
How big is your God?
Your God. And, the thing that impresses me is how much teaching he does simply by storytelling.
Yes.
And, I'm wondering if being prepared to tell stories can break that ice. I don't know, Gary. I haven't. I'm certainly not coming up with with an answer to the.
I second your motion, Tom. And Gary, my experience in the sales business and sales training is that one or two very brief stories from you changes the dynamic, that there's more likely to be a compare and contrast in the interaction. It's just, my experience is that opening with a story or two just might be the invitation to that compare and contrast. Does that make sense?
I wasn't interested in some sort of theological discussion. It was just dinner and drinks, but it was interesting. I asked them about things. They never asked me about things.
Right.
It's interesting. I don't know what else to say about that, but
Yeah.
John O'Donohue, the Irish mystic, says the best question you can ask anyone is, when was the last time you had a really good conversation? And to some extent, that's what we're talking. I remember as a young priest, it was kind of the other way around, where the young priest was afraid of kind of being rejected by the old man. Now it's kind of the old man, not exactly being afraid, but taken aback by being rejected by the young priest. And when I was first ordained, I was the youngest of four. And my first pastor, actually, who had been a terror in his earlier years, he and I somehow or other hit it off. And we became really, really good friends. You know, and at that time, he was 40 years older than me. And I always remember that the more difficult people to deal with were the guys in the middle. But it seems now it's not that way. It's that the older priest comes in and he's kind of not exactly on the defensive, but close in terms of, you know, how he's going to deal with the younger priest. And, you know, it's an interesting problem because in a sense, it's a new one. And I'm not sure how we get beyond it.
You know, I was interested in what Fred Lawrence wrote about, you know, his response this week to the conversation that we had last.
Yes.
Interesting that he said even the Paridi at the Second Vatican Council didn't know what the church was, you know.
Yeah.
But he talked at the very end about how Lonergan said, you know, when you've kept the lid on for so long, you know, everything is going to just blow up. And
Right.
he said that a lot of the seminarians reject the Second Vatican Council because of all the silliness that was done, you know, in the name of the spirit of Vatican II. And I have to agree. I mean, there was that. In fact, as I said, I was thinking to myself, I was part of that in my first years in Healdsburg. We had a youth mass on Sunday nights at 5, and it became. I mean, we were always trying to be creative and do one thing and do it. I even remember one time having, you know, some sort of people making collages during the mass, some crazy thing. And I finally, after I don't know how many months or a year, I finally came out one night and I said, you know what? I am not Gypsy Rose Lee. You know, her theme song was "Let Me Entertain You." You know, I said, we've had enough of this. You know, we're here to pray and not to be. I mean, I don't know what it was, but there was a lot of stuff that was happening just shortly after the council. You look at music, you had that Ray Rep and those few things, you know, and then but little by little, liturgical music came to be much more scriptural, much more serious, much deeper, you know, and. But I don't know that these guys remember the silliness. They weren't even around then.
No, but it's useful as a cudgel because, for example, you're subject to that kind of thing happening in any transition.
Right. Yeah.
Until it settles down.
Yeah.
And so I think some people ignore the fact that it was a time of transition just so they can pick up on the silliness as a cudgel to say, see what happened, this happened, that happened, the other thing happened. They never should have done Vatican II. Well, then nothing should ever have changed.
Yeah.
And so I actually get somewhat pissed off when I hear this critique of the spirit of Vatican II, as if every single person that ever celebrated Mass was doing it with balloons. Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Anybody read Kathleen Caveney's article in Commonweal about basically growing up in religious education in the 70s and essentially saying, hey, it wasn't that bad and I got a good grounding, even if it wasn't memorizing.
Right.
I'll send y'all a link to that.
When I was first ordained, my pastor had a friend and he was coming to visit. He was another old Monsignor in the diocese. And the pastor and I were friends. And so he said, Frank, I want you to meet Johnny Parsons. So I said, fine. So the other priest came in. He was somewhat pompous. He was sitting there, you know, dressed to the nines, choking. And so I walked in. I said, hi, Monsignor, how are you? Nice to meet you. And he said, are you a Litnik? He didn't say hello or anything. Are you a Litnik? And I said, I'm sorry, Monsignor, I don't know what that is. Oh, never mind, never mind. So my pastor came to me the next day and he said, Frank, Johnny Parsons was surprised that you didn't know what a litnik was. I said, I knew what a litnik was, but I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. Well, the pastor laughed. And then the next week, I was celebrating a funeral mass, and one of the old famous Monsignori of the Archdiocese of Boston came and sat in choir, you know, with the old mochetta or whatever they called it, the beretta, the whole bit. And so I celebrated mass. And afterwards, he came to me and said, Father, you celebrated mass digne, devote, et attente. And so these two people raised in the same era. I mean, it was one of the nicest things that anyone ever said to me with respect to celebrating mass, especially from Harry O'Connor.
Yeah.
But you see, these two people take these kind of immediately. The Litnik guy believed balloons. Anyone that was younger than he was into balloons.
Mhm.
And I think that whole spirit of Vatican II, in terms of taking it in that kind of negative, is just totally destructive. And it's indicative many times of people who don't know what the hell they're talking about. Sorry.
That's why I gave the seminarian, and I'm taking with me to Rome that book by Armin Rush, you know, on the vision of Vatican II, because
Right.
it's about what the Vatican II really was all about. In fact,
Right.
the seminarian Chris said he was reading because the focus on the Trinity. He said I need to reread that more and more. He says because that was very powerful for him, you know. So it is, and I realized years ago why I used to get angry at the critique of Vatican II priests and Vatican II, because that's how we were trained. You know, it's kind of a personal rejection. You know, we were trained into that mentality and that style.
Mhm.
It's sort of a rejection. And I was interested, you know, when Fred wrote that about how these seminarians think of the silliness of the Second Vatican Council. I've often thought, you know, because we've lost a lot of young people, period, in the last number of, you know, we've lost a couple of generations.
Definitely.
And you know, and Second Vatican Council was meant to address the secularization that was happening in Europe, you know. I mean, and how do we begin to deal with a secular culture, and how do we dialogue with it and all that sort of thing? But we've lost them. But I wonder if a lot of these young priests, anyway, if they grew up in a kind of a rootless world, you know, kind of a unstable world, and they're looking for some sort of stability, some sort of solid foundation, and they look to that old
Mhm.
Point. Kind of thing as
Right.
like an anchor.
Right.
I don't know, but I've often thought that.
That's a good point.
Yeah. The other thing that really impresses me is that, you know, the experience of World War II and what led up to World War II was very fresh on the minds of everybody involved in Second Vatican Council. And I think the idea of secularization and addressing that, yes, but behind that secularization was the devastating results of the kind of nationalism, toxic nationalism, that gave rise to World War II. Nobody learned their lessons after World War I.
Yeah, the war to end all wars.
Yeah, and it turned out to be the peace to end all peace. But you know, the other thing that I read once that really hit me was the in World War II, both in the battleground and in the concentration camps, Protestants, Catholics, and Jews were just thrown together and couldn't help but in some ways discover their common humanity and their common theological grounding, if you will, that Catholics and Protestants could not fight each other after being lumped together for the same reason, and persecuted for the same reason. And I think that was a very how would I say, compelling reason for saying, hey, we've got to get together and talk about this, and even invite, in some way, invite our, quote, separated brethren to at least be observers and therefore informal participants in this, which, it's kind of what they did.
I'm wondering if we had too much, I mean, obviously I was away for a long time, but my experience after having come back for 5 to 6 years is, if I sit and think about it, I think Vatican II has made an enormous contribution to how we do ministry in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it's not a drawback or an aberration or anything like that. It has, I mean, a full embrace of it really makes a difference as to how you minister to people and how you see people and how you celebrate the Eucharist, etc. And the notion that somehow or other what we do is off track or something, odd or less than celebrating the great mystery of Christ's love among us, I find that offensive. And I think there's some of that in what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Frank,
I also think that bringing more laity to participate in church activity too. That for a long time it was just a priest did everything, and now you see a lot of lay people participating, being part of the celebration and participating in it, doing readings and doing all these different parts of the mass, helping you celebrate the Eucharist, giving the Eucharist. To me, it's amazing to see that it really changed a lot. It used to be just the priest.
Mhm.
Bob, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I think that what you just talked about, your years in active ministry, and then the years of your raising your family and then coming back. I think you have a lot of insight there. I'd encourage you to write something up and submit it to America Magazine or to National Catholic Reporter, because I think that's very insightful what you just talked about. And,
Yes.
and it's covering a span of time, and we're all struggling with that differential of the Bloom people and who we are. And I think what we all need to come to be, and I think your assertion that Vatican II had an enormous impact on the way that we are serving this church. I think you have a lot to contribute there. I'd encourage you to write it up.
One of the things that I love about parish life in the role of a pastor is that you're and as I told this young seminarian who knows it very well, I said, the role of the pastor, what did St. Paul says, is to equip the saints for ministry. That's our job, is to help them do their ministry. And I always was very clear to people. I said, you're doing this not because you're helping me do my work.
Mm-hmm.
The parish has all the gifts it needs. It has all the ministries it needs to do its work, and I don't have them all. And I always remember, and I've used one time I had, when I was in Ukiah, a woman who was a Eucharistic minister to the sick, and said, Father, so and so she wants to go to confession. So next week I'm going to see her at whatever time it was, and could you come over and hear her confession? And I did, And then when it was done, then the Eucharistic minister came in, and then we said the prayers, and she gave her communion, and then she said, "Now, Father, you can leave if you need, but I'm going to spend more time with her now." And I always thought to myself, when I visit the sick, I'm like, I pop in, I'm there, and I'm gone.
Yep.
I mean, but it's just like you see people exercising their gifts and their talents, and it's a wonderful experience. I mean, I just never, I never, I mean, to me, the excitement was seeing people take responsibility for parish life and doing wonderful things with it, and
I'm glad you expressed that the way you did, because didn't Pope Francis reach out and extend the synod on synodality for another year?
Yes.
And that's taking root, hopefully.
Yeah, but that's the Vatican II vision. I mean,
It is, yeah.
that to me was the at least in my own practical life, aside from liturgy, that to me is the most the way I most experienced Vatican II in my own priesthood, and I think, Frank, you're right. It's a different theology that undergirds the old rite in a way, when the priest did everything.
Remembering that liturgy is a summit and source of Christian life and mission, we need to also acknowledge that the liturgical role of the non-ordained people, the laity, mirrors and reinforces their role as members of the body of Christ, members of the
Absolutely.
assembly and
Absolutely.
the community. And the interesting thing, it just dawning on me, many of the rather, I would say, conservative, maybe even very traditional movements in the church are lay oriented. It's not just that we've got these rad trad priests. It is that we've got a pretty good number of very influential and very active laypersons who are claiming their charism in the church and maybe giving it an emphasis that we may not always want. But it's also interesting. This just dawned on me too. The prime movers for scripture study in the United States, I think, are kind of based out of Steubenville. And, there are many movements coming from Steubenville-oriented, educated, and leadership people that are very influential in the Catholic scripture study life today. Not the academic study so much, but the realization of Vatican II and their vision, which is one of the things that has really caught on in the church, and that is the renewal of the place of Scripture within the people of God, within the church. A lot of that, not all, but a lot of that is being spurred on and informed by the people like Scott Hahn and the whole community of those who are often coming from an evangelical background.
But would you call them rad trads?
I would not call them rad trads.
I
No,
wouldn't either.
no.
Yeah.
But they are conservative. They are traditional.
Yeah.
They are definitely John Paul and Benedict people,
Right.
more so than Francis. They may be one of the keys to getting a little bit of dialogue between us for whom John Paul II and Benedict are not exactly our cup of tea, yet we have to admit they brilliantly led the church in a lot of necessary ways in their time. And
I'm-
and you know, uh, recognizing those folks and kind of integrating them into our consciousness may also be part of the bridge. I don't know. Bob?
Yeah, I was up in Seattle 2 weekends ago. I was up there to be the preacher at a parish for Unbound. And whenever we have one of those presentations, we have people that are already sponsors for the Unbound program, and they come from generally neighboring parishes, not always from the place that it is. And one couple was there, kind of middle-aged, I'd say middle-aged. They still have a child, at least one child at home, as I recall. And all of a sudden, they affirmed that they are from Steubenville, that they're very much formed by Steubenville. And they talked about Scott Hahn. And I have to say, I mean, that's a long way off, but I think Steubenville has a long reach that they've developed over time. I'm not all that acquainted with them and who all's there. I just know that they've been active for a long time. They were very charismatic back in the 70s. I was first exposed to that kind of thing. And then I think they got into some very trouble. I think there was some disagreement between the diocese, which, by the way, is going to be abolished. And
Yeah.
Steubenville is going to be joined together with Columbus. But I think that's very interesting what you're saying, that there is a growth in scriptures. The other thing, I don't know whether all of you get Robert Barron's daily comment on the gospel.
I do.
And it's like 3 paragraphs, pretty simple and very down to earth, I think. I mean, he's publishing one book after another of all kinds of sorts. So there was just something that came across, and I forgot the name of it. It's a long time guy that's been working on scripture, but he's trying to sell, for each year, a $30 book. He seems to be selling a lot of books.
Mhm. Yeah.
He seems to be very well funded, and Steubenville seems to have sufficient funding as well. But Steubenville is very conservative, that whole operation there. I mean,
Yeah.
we had to chase a bunch of the Steubenville kids that came all the way up to Struthers, Youngstown, because they were putting sheets, things that were trying to put in a side of what you should vote for. They put them in all the window sills while people were at mass. So we had to get them to leave. But anyway, I'm very interested that you came up with that, Tom.
Yeah. There's another, the Benedictine College in Kansas. I kind of latched on to Tom Hoop's newsletter, and he has some good stuff, fairly solid, but they are educating also traditionally oriented leaders who I think don't share a lot of the craziness. Now, there's always going to be that fringe in those groups that will be crazy, that we can sometimes point to and say, yeah, you see they're showing their real colors. But there's always those fringe groups on our side that they point to and say, there go the balloons again.
Yep.
Well, also people are kind of either empathetic or in alliance to Steubenville that Steubenville then promotes. And I think Barron is one of those, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And Peter Kreft, who
That's
taught
the
at
guy.
college
That's the
people.
guy.
Yeah.
And, the latest thing from Barron is that Peter Kreft has now published a new book on the readings for Cycle A. He's already done Cycle C for Sunday liturgies. And so people are going to use this, very seriously. And I think that that's pulling us in one direction that may not be completely in the line, well, it's Steubenville's direction, basically.
Yeah,
But I think Barron's a player in that world, because I think Barron basically has a foot in both of them by design.
yeah. And this guy
I
Mike
mean, Barron does some very good, let me say, he does some
Yeah.
very good things. And he's very astute in a lot of things. And, you know, like for instance, he's put out this $7 a month Liturgy of the Hours. I find it wonderful because I don't have to get out it doesn't have everything, but it has morning, evening, and night prayer. And you don't have to get out your computer or fiddling around page to page. It's all right there in front of you. And at the end of the month, you throw it away. So I think there's some really good things that he does, and I've heard him say some really good things. But I think he has a sympathetic opening to Steubenville that shows itself.
Yeah, and I think that we should not dismiss that. I've got
No.
many problems with Bishop Barron, but I admire very much what he's doing.
Right.
I'm not and part of it is I think I'm not at all apologetics oriented.
Yeah.
But probably the Peter Kreeft and Steubenville style of apologetics is probably something that does need to be acknowledged.
Who can say something about Kraft? And what did you find in his Liturgy of the Day, Frank, in using that book? I presume it's what Kraft put together, or is that?
Yeah, I don't use it. I just saw an advertisement for it today
I
from
see.
Barron, and then looking it up, found out that he did one for Cycle C.
Okay, yeah,
Well, I haven't seen that, but this is advertising for the upcoming year for Cycle A.
yeah.
But I know he's taught at Boston College, he's spoken around, and he's very much in the line and profile, say, of Scott Hahn. They're very similar.
Okay,
We have in our area, we have a group of young people that are called Focus, and they go to colleges and they work at people there. It's kind of interesting meeting them, and they have me come over and do benediction at the little service they had. It's kind of interesting. They're working and they're really dedicated to working with students and trying to get students turned more towards God in their life.
you say it's Focus?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've ran into those a couple years back.
I think they're a Catholic
They are Catholic.
imitation of the what was it called? The Campus Crusade for Christ. They're a Catholic version of that.
Exactly. Exactly.
There's an organization that's sending young people to all kinds of universities and colleges. And I think they seem to be finding their way into Catholic universities of diverse kind. And I think I'm going to have to look into it, but Youngstown State University, we've got a Newman Center that's operating, and I think they are getting young people that are more on the conservative side. Of course, the guy that's in charge of it now is a young Dominican, but a bright one, came out of Harvard and finished his PhD because he got sick. But I think he's brought in a staff that is coming out of Christendom. One of the persons there is coming out of Christendom, and I think they're very present to the other students at the university. I think that's the way that they work. It's not like they're running a shop in the Newman Center. They're going out and mixing with people and talking and having lunch and all that sort of thing is what I sense they're doing.
Is that Christendom College that you're referring to? Yeah.
Yes, this one person there is Christendom College.
Right.
That's not a Catholic, is it?
No.
Yes.
So
It is? Oh, I didn't know. I thought it was evangelical, but I might be wrong. Yeah.
No, let's look it up.
but Focus is Catholic.
Yes.
What is?
Focus.
Oh, Focus.
Yeah, no, there was a young kid in our parish who came from an evangelical family and went to St. Vincent's High School and became Roman Catholic. he joined the Dominicans for a while, but he's since left and got married, and he's teaching I think at the Catholic high school down in San Rafael. I forget it right now, but Marin Catholic.
Yeah,
But he joined that Focus for a while. He had to raise money but he was on it for about a year or two, you know. And I looked it up, and I could see it had that more evangelical
Right.
flavor. But I mean, it's not a bad thing.
Well, it's good.
Yeah, I don't think that's bad. As I say, I don't mind, you know, it's just the clergy that are so fiercely opposed, that what bothers me. And I see that at St. Eugene's at our cathedral, you know, and then some of these young priests are coming up, but I don't know.
Christendom College is a Catholic liberal arts college in
Oh.
Front Royal, Virginia.
Sorry about that. I thought it
Peninsula
was.
Valley.
Yeah.
Okay, it's endorsed by the Newman Guide to Choosing a Catholic College, has been characterized as a conservative Catholic liberal arts college that does not accept federal funding, and has 44 academic staff. They're called the Crusaders, etc.
Okay.
Haters.
You know, the other thing I wanted to ask is, you know, there was I don't know who I was talking to. I tried, you know, to try to develop parish life, or there were all different kinds of movements like Curcio and John, you had, you know, that Called and Gifted, and I used for a while, I was using the Gallup organization. They had a thing about discovering your strengths, and there's all different kinds of things. And then there was a kind of a renewal movement or a program, I think it came out of Britain. I can't think of the word right now, but it has been very effective. It seemed to be very effective in reaching young people. I can't. It'll come to me, but
Is that a Enneagram?
no, it's
Is it like that?
no, it's kind of I don't know if it's a weekend experience or like, you know, like remember we had Christ Renews His Parish, and what was it, Renew and things like that, you know. It's that kind of a program that I can't think of the name of it right now. But,
Time for me to go, guys. I look forward to being with you next Friday.
Thank-
And I'll
Thanks,
be
Bobby.
gone for about 3
Bye,
weeks.
Bob.
Nice to have the Holy Trinity right above your head.
There you go.
All the rabbits. Keeps my head warm.
Bob, would you send us a reference to where that window is in Germany?
I'll try to dig it up. It's in one of the major German cathedrals, I think.
Uh-huh.
Long ago, not recent. Peace,
Those
guys.
are hairs, and they're right above your head, so you got lots of hairs on your head.
That's why I shave.
Good pun, Norman.
Well, I wonder, shall we call it an early?
I think so. I need to start packing. I got
Yeah,
some things to
Gary,
do
bon
today.
voyage. Enjoy your time.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Send us all an email now and again, and if you come
Yeah, have a good
across-
trip.
Thank you. Thank you.
I probably won't be here next week, Tom. I have a sister who's coming home from a nursing home, and she actually, I don't know if you've seen the movie Father Stu. He has this thing called inclusion body myositis.
Oh, wow.
Ah,
And it's rare in women, but my sister has it.
Wow.
So she's going through the losing muscle tone and all that, confined to a wheelchair. But she's able to come home to her own home. So I have to bring her home next Friday.
okay. Well, all the best, and we'll be praying for your sister too.
Thank you very
And you're a
much.
good brother.
Prayers go with you.
Yeah.
Thank you
Shall we
very much.
call
Thank you, Norm. Bye-bye.
Call it a day. And
Okay.
I'll be in
God
touch.
bless everybody.
farewell to
God bless.
everybody, and
Yeah.
God bless.